general government budget. Before we get started, are there any requests for bills? Any bill requests? And I forget to ask this every once in a while. So if you do later on, if you do have one, just raise your hand. Say, hey, I got bill request before we get started. So, all right, seeing none, we'll go on. All right, today we have three hearings: Department of Labor, the Dental Board, and examiners in optometry. And so we are going to start with the Department of Labor. And so, Stephen, if you would like to give us an overview, that would be great.
Sure. Good afternoon, committee. My name is Stephen Wu with the Legislative Research Department. Before I get started, I'm going to recognize that Secretary of Labor Amber Schultz is with us in the audience. She and her staff will be able to provide more information on more operational details if the committee would like. So just to set the stage, the Kansas Department of Labor's mission is to provide workers and employers with various information and services on topics including unemployment, workers' compensation, labor markets, and more. As a high-level roadmap of what I'll be talking about today, first, I'm going to talk about the funding sources and big expenses for the Department of Labor. Second, I'm going to talk about notable changes in fiscal year 24, our current fiscal year. Next, I'll talk about fiscal year 25 and the items you can see, the items of change there. And lastly, I'll mention a bit on the capital improvements projects included within the Department of Labor's budget. So first on funding sources, if you'll look at the budget analysis in front of you, you'll turn to page 4 and 6. There will be a table, a section titled expenditures and financing on it. In that table, you'll be able to see the four major funding sources, the four major buckets for the Department of Labor. First, there is the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. Expenditures from this fund constitute the vast majority of the Department of Labor's budget, about 60 or 70%. The revenue into this fund includes contribution, taxes, and interest related to UI benefits. Next, you'll see federal funds. This usually constitutes about 10 to 20% of the Department of Labor's budget, and these are funds from various grants and agreements that the agency receives. Third, in order, you'll see the SGF, the State General Fund, will comprise a little under 10% of the agency's budget. These primarily fund salaries as well as some special projects such as the UI modernization project that the legislature has allocated money to before. And lastly, you'll see some detail on fee funds. The revenue sources into the Department of Labor from fee funds is detailed in a table on page 5. There's later down in that table, you'll see the revenue that the department receives from various federal funds and grants. Now, talking about expenses, overall spending for the Department of Labor is, in general, comparable to the years leading up to the COVID-19 pandemic. It's around $200 million, give or take, based on the fiscal year, but it's been about that level for a couple of years leading up to the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic changed a number of things for the Department of Labor's budget, but if you remove those items and you just look at what the Department of Labor's operating costs are, it's around $200 million and has remained at that level for a number of years. The majority of the Department of Labor's budget is for paying out unemployment insurance benefits. If you'll turn back to figure 4 on page 4, you'll see in that table, there's a line for other assistance. It's around halfway down the table. You'll see that comprises the largest portion of expenditures for the Department of Labor. So for example, in fiscal year 23, the agency spent a little over $178 million. Of that amount, about $108 million, $109 million of that was to pay out UI benefits. And you can see that carrying across into 24, 25, and onward. If you, for the Department of Labor's budget, aside from that, you'll see that in terms of operations, their budget is around $60 million, give or take. You can see that detailed in the operating lines up above. Before I jump into 24, there are a couple of items that you're going to see appear in both 24 and 25. These are items that are, as much as I can describe it as, they are within the normal course of business within the Department of Labor. These encompass two things. The first is are updating estimates and projections on the payments of unemployment insurance benefits. These adjustments reflect updating estimates based on new information that the Department of Labor has received throughout the year. So if you just think about the timeline, when the legislature approved a budget back in May, the Department of Labor worked under a certain set of assumptions. now when they submit their budget in September or so, they have more information gained from those 2 points in time. And now that we're before the legislature in January, they have even more information gained then. So they update their estimates regularly. You'll see adjustments in 24 and 25 based on that. The second big category that you'll see in both years is our updates to the administration of the unemployment system. These are federal dollars received from the distributed per the Social Security Act that is for the administration of the federal UI program. That all said, let's jump into fiscal year 24, which you'll find on page 7. In fiscal year 24, the legislature approved about $191 million. About 15 million of this comes from the general fund. This includes about 9 million of state general funds that weren't spent at the end of 23 and reappropriate to 24. All these dollars are attributed to, the vast majority of these dollars are attributed to the UI modernization project. It's simply a matter of timing. They weren't spent at the end of 23, they'll be spent early 24. The agency requests about $186 billion. About 15 million of this comes from the state general fund. This is a bit lower than what the legislature approved, about 4 or 5 million lower. And this is due to a couple of notable items. The first, item 2, is the pay plan shortfall that I believe this committee has heard a couple times now. You'll see these across a lot of agency budgets. This is to true up the cost of the legislative pay plan that was in the appropriations bill last session. For the Department of Labor, that's about a $55,000 increase from the state general fund. Item 2 are those updated payments, updated estimates for UI benefit payments. For fiscal year 24, it's about a $11 million decrease. The Department of Labor anticipated paying slightly more when the budget was approved back in May. Now, since they have some more updated information, they've adjusted that downward accordingly. Item 4 is a similar matter with the administration of the federal UI program. These are all grant dollars that the U.S. Department of Labor distributes from the Social Security Act. The Department of Labor has updated their estimates on the dollars they've received in, as well as how much they're spending out of that fund. And so these are just updated estimates based on those. For fiscal year 24, the governor doesn't recommend any changes from the agency's estimate. So the numbers you'll see in the governor's column are the same as what the agency requested. At this point, I know I've given you a lot of information already. Before I go on to 25, does the committee have any questions?
So the $7 million, number 4, is an increase in their operating budget, basically, from the feds. So where does that go? I mean, I guess what is that $7 million going to be used for?
It's for administration of the UI program.
Okay. I understand that. I guess I'm trying to figure out. So they're getting $7 million more than they thought they were going to get at the beginning of the year, right? So
the short answer is yes. The little bit more nuanced answer is that the numbers reflected in this table reflect expenditures. So they're spending $7 million more. Now they could be spending $7 million more because they are receiving $7 million.
Okay. All right.
2 parts.
Okay. But do we know where that set? Well, maybe that's it. I'll ask the secretary on that. Where that? Okay. That's fine. Okay, Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in these charts anywhere, is there we've seen this in the past, the balance in that unemployment fund. Is that there? And I just was not finding it. What is our current balance on our unemployment fund?
The current
Bring that. I think the departments. I asked them to bring that, so I think they're going to bring that with them.
I'm going to defer the bulk of the answer to the department, but you can find some high-level information on page 5. There's going to be a graph at the top with some on-budget expenditures total for the UI Trust Fund, and that paragraph that's right after that, that last sentence, you'll see that on July 1st of 23, the balance of the fund was about $1.3 billion.
Any other questions for Stephen before he goes on to 25? Okay, let's go ahead and go on 25.
Great. Moving on to 25, you'll see this on page 10. So for fiscal year 25, the agency requests about $197 million. About $10 million of this comes from the general fund. This is a bit higher than fiscal year 24, about $10 million higher. And it's due to a couple items. Numbers 1 and 2 refer to enhancement requests that are within the agency's budget request this year. So the first item, number 1, refers to the continued maintenance of the unemployment IT system. This is an enhancement request of about $5 million, and it includes expenditures to maintain the system, including the core system as well as various peripheral systems. This would also be put towards hourly contract support for the modernized system. The department indicates that they've applied for all federal funding available for these funds for this project, and they've received several one-time awards, but those dollars were put towards the main project. The enhancement request in front of the legislature now is not the core project, but for maintenance in the years moving forward. The second item, the second enhancement request, is for an increase in the official hospitality limitation for the Secretary of Labor's office. There are two parts to this. So first, it includes an increase in the expenditure limit allowable for official hospitality events. These are events that the agency, the secretary, can put on to engage stakeholders of various projects and operations. Can be put towards food, drink, other expenditures along those lines. So number 1 would be to increase that expenditure limit from $2,000 to $5,000. The second part of that is a request for that difference, that $3,000 difference, an appropriation of that amount. So the Department of Labor is essentially requesting an increase to that limitation as well as the appropriation of the funds to cover that difference. It's worth noting that the Department of Labor, their hospitality limitation on their SGF account has been at $2,000 for a number of years. And in their budget submission, they indicate various inflationary pressures that necessitate a higher limit. The other changes included in fiscal year 25 are the same things as in fiscal year 24. There's updated estimates for UI benefits as well as administration of the UI program. You'll see that it's about a $17 million increase in estimates for benefit payments and about a $3.5 million decrease for administration of the UI program. The governor's recommendation for 25. The governor concurs with the agency's budget request, but for one item, one change, and that relates to the official hospitality enhancement. So you'll recall I talked about that enhancement including 2 parts, increasing the expenditure limit and appropriating those additional funds. The governor recommends only increasing the limit, not appropriating those funds. And that's the only change that you'll see within the governor's recommendation. Everything else is as the agency requested. Okay. With that, I'm happy to take questions now. I can touch on the capital improvements section at the very end.
Oh yeah, go ahead and do that. Yeah,
sure. So the agency's capital improvements budget has been. So earlier today, the Joint Committee on State Building Construction heard and approved the agency's capital improvements budget request. These projects that are included within this section, oh, my apologies, this is on page 25. It's the last physical sheet of this analysis. The items included within, the projects included within this table are all the same as what was in the agency's 5-year capital improvements request that they've submitted to the Joint Committee on State Building Construction. So the projects that are listed here have been reviewed a number of times. They've been approved by those committees, by that committee a number of times as well. At a very high level, for fiscal year 24, the agency requests a little under $1.4 billion. This is for a variety of projects related to their 3 office buildings within Topeka. There's an office building on 401 Southwest Topeka, one on 1309 Southwest Topeka, and one on 2650 East Circle Drive South. These projects include general rehab and repair, about $240 in fiscal year 24. They include upgrades to the physical security of those buildings. That's about $340,000 in 24. Renovations of the break room, improvements on their HVAC system, and renovations of the basement. The governor for 24 concurs with what the agency requests for that year. And for 25, you'll see the request for their general rehab and repair dollars. You'll see that continue. They're requesting $200,000 for rehab and repair in 25, as well as some funding for 3 projects. The first is to reconfigure the first floor of my apologies, reconfigure the first floor of 401 South Topeka. The second is to replace some entry doors as well as to replace some air handler units. And so, like I mentioned earlier, the Joint Committee on State Building Construction heard and approved these budgets, this capital improvement budget earlier today. They did make one change, the one recommendation, and that is for the House Committee on Appropriations as well as the Senate Committee on Ways and Means. Consider the consider the inspection of replacement of some cast iron piping at one of their office buildings. They recommend that be looked at in 25 instead of when it was originally scheduled in 26. Past that, the Joint Committee's recommendation is the same as what the governor recommended.
So, Stephen, do we have a number on that?
Yeah, I was just informed that the inspection itself will cost about $6,000, all of which the agency indicates they can absorb within their current budget.
Okay, so it wouldn't be any new allocation. Just do we need to give them that authority to do that earlier, or is the building committee's authority good enough? Or does it matter?
This committee doesn't need to, but House Appropriations, the Joint Building Committee recommendations for House Appropriations to make that recommendation.
Right. Okay. We probably will make a note in ours then.
Sure.
Probably should, just so it's okay. All right. Any other questions? Representative Riley.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I noticed on page 1 there, over the last 3 years, the amount of their budgeted FTEs has been pretty consistent, 439 down to 437. So do we have any numbers as far as percentage of shortages? Because there for a while, we knew that they were not able to hire people quick enough to fill those slots. So where are they at as far as shrinkage?
I'm going to defer full response of that to the department themselves, but my understanding is about 410 FTE are currently filled, which leaves the remainder about 20 or 30 FTE that remain vacant.
Even where's the workers' compensation fee fund graph?
I have not included it in here. I can provide that information separately if you'd like. Is there some particular information?
Well, I just was curious. Part of the capital improvements is coming out of that fee fund. I was just curious.
Okay.
Is that it?
I can provide the committee with that information.
Okay,
afterwards.
that'd be great. Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Welcome, Representative Williams.
Thank you. Apologize for being late.
It's all right. Adam will forgive you. Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. Stephen, thank you very much. All right. So we have with us Secretary Schultz. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for having us here this afternoon. Be happy to answer any questions that you have. We did receive a request for information regarding the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. So just a little bit of information regarding that. Its current balance is $1.34 billion. Each year on December 1st, we send a notice of solvency to the governor's office. And this year we are glad to report that the trust fund is solvent. And it's basically a ratio calculation of the state wages, the balance of the trust fund, and the benefits paid. So what this ratio calculation tells us, if we were to pay out benefits at the rate of our last 3 highest benefit years, in this instance, it was 2009, 2010, and 2021, we'd be able to pay benefits at the same rate for a year and 8 months. Our trust fund is in very, very good shape, and that's thanks a lot to the good work this body did.
So, Secretary, on that note, is it next year or this next, was it November or December that businesses will get some businesses will get a no tax bill, or was that this last year?
It was actually this last year. Some businesses actually did
Okay.
see a drop in their tax rate. Not all.
Right, I know, understand that. Yeah. but a significant number of them probably did.
Yes, yeah, we are on what we call the solvency schedule.
Great. Okay. Go ahead.
Great. I'd be happy to answer any other questions related to the trust fund.
Any other questions? Trust fund? Go ahead.
Great. And then the next request I had to touch on was the unemployment rate for the state of Kansas. So hot off the presses, just last week, we announced that the December 2023 unemployment rate was 2.8%. This is up just slightly from 2.9% in November, and it still remains one of the all-time lowest unemployment rates for the state of Kansas. Going back, we've been hovering around this 2.5, 2.8 for about 2 years now. We haven't really seen that since the late 70s.
Okay, great. Any other questions on that before she goes on? Yeah, Representative Smith.
I hope this makes sense. With the unemployment rate as low as it is, does the trust fund grow quite a bit?
They are actually, well, no, not necessarily. So the trust fund is dependent on employers contributing their taxes based on the wages of their employees. So that happens quarterly. So actually, now that I think about it, that might be a really good question for our labor economist to come back and answer for you sometime.
Okay, thank you very
Be
much.
happy to do that.
Thank you.
Representative Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we calculate our unemployment rate the same way that the federal government does, or does our equation algorithm differ?
Right. And so it all rolls up to the U.S. unemployment rate, which right now I believe is sitting around 3.7.
Follow-up question. Now, I don't know how to be 100% clear with this, but in that algorithm, I understand that labor participation has an effect on that. Now, can you tell me what our labor participation is relative to our unemployment rate?
I can, if you give me 1 second. I have it in my notes. I believe the state of Kansas labor participation rate, I think, is at 66.4%, whereas the U.S. participation rate is at 62.5.
Representative Robinson.
Thank you. How does your department or the state count people who are severely unemployed but would like to have employment, don't have the tools to go to work with like an address or a valid ID or transportation?
So underemployment, yeah. So
not employed.
Sure.
Employment compensation or in your numbers.
Sure, great question. So one of the divisions of the Department of Labor is our labor market information folks. And so they essentially gather information on what the workforce looks like. On the flip side, the workforce development is actually in the Department of Commerce. So Secretary Tolan would actually be a better one to answer directly that question for the kind of the underemployed. Mm-hmm.
All right, Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to go off your unemployment insurance budget.
Just tell me what page that is.
Yeah. Page 658.
Oh, geez. Okay. All right.
So each one of these divisions of the Department of Labor are broke down. And this one is on the unemployment insurance, which is what we've been discussing. Mm-hmm. So if I was to add an extra line in there, because I was confused what your program goals were, what would you say would be the mission of the unemployment insurance division? The mission.
The mission of the unemployment insurance division, that would be to provide economic security to those in need when they are searching for work.
So nothing to do with employers. More on the side of for the employees rather than the employers.
Well, the employers certainly play a pivotal part in that relationship.
So then that would be part of your mission statement of both of them are important to your mission
Yes.
of providing services to the employers so that they are providing services to the employees if something happens and they're laid off work.
Mhm.
So then when you're looking at your goals, I don't know that I couldn't identify right up then your A goal there is to continue to improve, enhance the levels of customer service. I mean, are you on the same page?
I'm looking at, so to us, a customer is not just a claimant. The customer is also the employer, and it's also our stakeholders. You, I consider the legislature a customer, you're a stakeholder, other state agencies are a stakeholder.
I agree with that to some extent, but really your customer is employees because that's unemployment, right?
Well, we aren't the employer of this. Our customers, one of them would be claimants who are claiming against the unemployment insurance.
Right, but again, your employers or your customer, I don't see us as being your customer. You're a middle person of handling that insurance fund between the offset of somebody working at a job and then they lose their job. You're helping them out by providing those benefits of unemployment insurance for a period of time.
Correct, that's part of
That
the equation.
goal.
Mhm.
So therefore, your output would be how many employers that you are working with, how many people that are unemployed would be people that you're working with. And then I see one of your output goals is to be able to, within 14 days, to be able to provide benefits to those people. You know, we went through a year or so of time when that was a long time, 14 days in order to get your first paycheck. So it seems to me like the goal would be how quickly can we initiate that claim? How quickly, how many days does it take to get that claim paid? Those would be some kind of your goals. Does that make sense? And then so that would be your output. And then the outcome of that is, well, 75% of the time, we got a paycheck out to people within 7 days.
Yeah, yes,
See,
those are great. You're exactly right. And we do have those metrics. So we work very closely with the US Department of Labor, and we have an entire division within our unemployment insurance called benefits accuracy measurement. I'd be certainly happy to give you all the information that we send to USDOL regarding those very same metrics.
okay, well, I'm just looking at what you were actually using for your outcome, and I'm just wondering if you could fine tune those a little bit with the clarity of who your customers are. So therefore that provides specific goals. You notice in your goals, you have nothing in that line. So you're not meeting any goals. They're not related to any goals. Your performance measures are not. I'm trying to give you a bad time. I'm just, we went through, that was a discussion that we had our first week was, can we do a better job of working on these performance measures so that we get to the point that we're coming up with stuff that are you are meeting your goals through a certain amount of output of what your people are doing, and then at that point, what the outcomes are that you're helping out your original people, which how are you helping out the employees? How are you helping out the employers? That kind of thing. So
Certainly, and as you probably know, we are going through a major modernization project with our unemployment insurance, and so that is the one thing that's going to help us exceed these goals. So when we come before you in 2025, you'll be able to see the difference.
So when I see that, like number 5 there, it says you have so many claims. So we hear that all the time. You have many claims. How many of those claims did you close within 7 days? How many of those claims did you close in 14 days?
Certainly, we can absolutely change those to reflect what we already report. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Again, you know your business better than we do. All I'm saying is maybe you can take a look at your goals, those 3 goals. Don't look very specific. And then look at your measures that you have down here as far as your output of your employees and what they're doing. which number of weekly claims, that's a good point of output, right? But what's the outcome of that is how well are you taking care of that?
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll leave these on here, but I'm just saying maybe we could do better on this.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary, thanks for being here today. Interesting in the conversation with the Vice Chair, but you call employers customers of KDOL, and I tend to believe that's probably true a lot of ways because of somebody who has been had to make those payments over time. Part of the responsibility of the agency, isn't it, to manage as me being an employer and being a customer of KDOL. Part of your job is to manage what my responsibility is going to be and what my participation levels is going to be. How does that work? Can you tell me?
Wow. I would be happy to have one of our tax gurus come in here and talk to you about how your experience rating is determined.
Maybe how it works is not the right question. Probably more. That is the responsibility of your agency
Yes.
to me as an employer. Correct.
Correct.
Is to make sure that you're managing my account,
Yes.
what my participation is going to be.
Absolutely.
And at any time I want, I can call your agency and find out where I'm at in the program.
That's absolutely correct. And when you're a brand new business in the state, we provide you a workbook of all the things you must know about the Department of Labor.
I want to go to real quickly the number 4 on, so the insurance administration, $7 million or 7.2 million. So you got an additional 7.2 million. Where exactly did that money? Where was it spent? I mean, so you're always probably anticipating that ebb and flow of that, right?
So this line represents additional grant dollars that we received from USDOL. So some of it could include some leftover funding from the pandemic era programs like the PUA, FPUC, those things that we're still kind of cleaning up and paying out. But it also includes grant funding that we applied for and received for the Tiger grants from USDOL, Integrity, and the equity grants from USDOL. Unfortunately, we were not awarded any grants related to modernization. They changed that kind of mid-flight, and the grant had to be for modernized systems that weren't in flight yet. So new things, well, we're in the middle of a modernization. And then it also became first come, first serve. So some states wrote a paragraph, some states like Kansas provided a very diligent grant framework, and we were not selected for that.
Okay, so I see in 25 you're anticipating about 3 million less than, or 3.5 million less than 24. So, I mean, I guess just how do you? Part of that's used for operations, right?
That is for the administration, yeah, of running the UI program.
So, I guess do you apply for, say, well, we've got more expense here, so you apply for more from the federal government? Is that how it works?
So there's a very sophisticated model that every state and territory does. It's called the RJM, the Resource Justification Model. And it's probably about 50 pages of Excel spreadsheets that we have to go through. And it calculates everything that you can imagine, from keeping the lights on to how long does it take somebody to make copies to an appeal. It's very sophisticated. And this model shows us how much we should be receiving in administration benefits. This year, it was about 39 million was the calculation that we submitted. We received about 20 million.
So you don't always receive everything that.
No.
All right, good enough. And the 10 million is, I understand that. So I guess that's now the 8.9 million. That was a repro. How much? Remind me how much we put in as far as state general fund for the modernization
This past fiscal year was 20.5 million.
in 24.
Yes, 23.
Yes,
Yes, but it didn't happen until
So you reappropriate.
Losing my years.
Right.
Yes, it was last year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And so this 8 million is the last of it?
Yes.
So the modernization should be up and running by the end of this year.
We're
this
shooting
calendar
for
year.
quarter 3.
Quarter 3.
Mhm.
Okay. So almost the end of the year.
Yep.
And it's on schedule. It's on budget. All the good things.
Yep,
that
it's
we
on
wanna hear.
schedule within scope. I will say, well, on the schedule part, we're about 7 days behind schedule but considering it was a 26-month project, we feel pretty good about that. On budget and within scope, which is the other issue that you see a lot with projects of this magnitude, is that there's scope creep, and we've had none of that.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay. So that's in 24, and then 25 is much the same. So I don't really see anything that now the $5 million for the IT maintenance, is that going to be an on every year occurrence?
Yeah, we are dedicated and determined to make sure that this system is always up to date. And so these are some of the conversations that we'd had with UCMIC and Commerce a few years ago when they passed 2196. They're just like any other system, just like a road, a water plant, there's going to be maintenance costs involved. And this is the beginning of that.
So what was your maintenance cost? That's 5 million. Is that the total maintenance cost, or is that additional to what's already been budgeted?
That's additional to what's already been budgeted for the implementation of the core system, the warranty, and the maintenance of the core system. So what this particular 5 million is going to be for is kind of that ancillary software, server space, middleware, so systems can talk to each other. As we get into the out years of the modernization project, then we'll have $5 to $10 million annually for the whole bucket. So there's the core UI and all supporting systems.
So how much is the total right now, though?
For the implementation?
Yeah, this 5 million plus what?
5 million. So the 43.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I don't know
I'm
if
not
we're
sure.
talking the same question.
I may not be asking quite right. So it says maintenance, but it's really not maintenance necessarily, because you're still doing some upgrade of some systems with that 5 million.
Yes, some ancillary systems.
So okay, yeah.
Our CFO Don Palmer
Yeah,
would like to clarify.
Come on. And state your name and your job title, please.
Hi, I'm Dawn Palmberg. I'm the CFO at the Department of Labor. So the $5 million does not cover all of the maintenance in 2025. We've got, I think it's about $6.5 million in 2025 that we're expecting to see for maintenance. We have some of it, and this is what we anticipate needing going forward.
But that's maintenance, or is that still some, because you mentioned some ancillary systems?
In the beginning, it is some ancillary systems, and it'll cover things like bug fixes and things that come along with a brand new system. Once you get it up and running, there's always those things that you don't anticipate happening. But going forward, that will go away. All those bug fixes and things like that you have right at the beginning, and then we will hopefully go into maintenance mode with that same allotment of money.
5 million.
Yes.
Okay. So okay. So that's about 6.5 million is what you're anticipating spending in 25.
Yes.
And you've got $1.5 million of it. So that 5 million, does it have to come out of state general fund? Is there any other place that you can take part of it out, or any other funds?
We do not. No.
All right. So that you can't take any of that out of any of the federal money that comes in through the.
No, we are anticipating the federal grant because of the reduction of the workloads from the pandemic. It's gonna start decreasing, and we've already started seeing that.
So before, what was your maintenance? Did you have any maintenance costs?
Yes, we a lot of our maintenance costs were through OITS. And their servers were transitioning from some of their servers to cloud-based servers. And I can't speak to all of that, but we don't anticipate seeing a decrease in maintenance. It's just swapping one thing for something else.
But is it an increase?
Yes.
Of 5 million?
Yeah, I mean, because we were paying for it on our own before, but it was mainframe systems, really old systems.
Right, I understand that. I'm trying to figure out if this 5 million, I'm just gonna be asked. I mean, in appropriations, when I go, I need to understand exactly. This 5 million is, I understand the whole maintenance that we've got to maintain the system and everything. But you had maintenance before, maybe not as much. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. What is our maintenance level now compared to what it was before the modernization?
So with all of the systems that we had before, it was between 2 and 3 million.
Okay.
And we're looking at between 5 and 10 million going forward.
Okay. Still doesn't, but you're only going to be asking for 5.
We are anticipating some savings, so being able to cover some of it, but asking for the 5 million. USDOL is trying to go to National Congress to get some more funds put into the base UI budget for this kind of thing as well. Yes. So we haven't seen that. We don't know what it's going to end up looking like if we get anything, but that is the anticipation.
Okay. All right. I think I'll, if I don't totally understand, we'll talk later about it some more, but I appreciate that. Representative Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be remiss if I didn't take advantage of this opportunity to ask you this question while you're here. The ranking brought up a good point and keyed off a light bulb in my head. Then the vice chair here did the same, and I got to looking, and I saw on the outcome measures, it says percent of employers audited within the year. Could you please tell me what that audit process looks like, what that entails? And then I have a follow-up question after that.
Sure. So each year, all of our auditors are assigned a metric to audit particular businesses, and that's for a variety of things, making sure that they're paying the appropriate amount of employment taxes, making sure they don't have misclassified workers. So people that are saying that they're contractors when in actuality they're actually employees. And so there's a variety of ways that can happen. They can do it on the phone, they can do it on Teams, they can request to do it in person, and our auditors will go through the books with them and determine whether or not they've paid the appropriate amount of employment taxes.
Okay, so it's a fraud prevention audit.
No, it's not fraud. It's paying the share that you're owed to the trust fund.
Okay. Follow-up question.
We do have auditors that do specialize in fraudulent employer schemes, if that's what you're asking. Yeah.
Follow-up question. So during the COVID apocalypse, when fraudulent applications were flying, as an employer myself, I had employees who had claims on their name and their social security number that didn't. My company did not lay anybody off. It did not stop paying anybody, yet those claims were made. Were those fraudulent situations identified and remedied? And was there an impact to the employer?
No.
So
they were remedied and there was no impact to your experience rating.
Thank you. My experience rating. You knew where I was going with it. Very good. Thank you for the opportunity to ask the question, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any other questions for the secretary on 24 or 25? Representative Amy. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary, I noticed under the capital improvements at both 20 and 24, it talks about in 24, there were revised estimates for expenditures of SGF in the amount of $834,000, and then $556,000 comes from the workers' compensation fee fund. Is it appropriate to use those fee funds for capital improvements?
Yes, so all of our divisions participate in the capital improvement, and it's done by FTE count and space allocated in the building. So the workers' compensation fund is about 40% of our entire CIP budget, with the other remaining being industrial safety and health, unemployment insurance, and labor market statistics.
I guess if I could, it seems to me that that is a responsibility probably of SGF, because wouldn't workers' compensation funds be funds that would be used for somebody that was injured on the job or whatever?
They also have administration funds. They have to have, a building, lights, HVAC, office space. So it's just part of the administration. However, I'm sure I would be ecstatic if you would take all of our CIP directly out of SGF.
It just seems strange to me. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But you have that broke up as of the percentage of what the of how many employees, how much space
they take up.
Okay, all right, okay. I was gonna ask a little bit differently the other way, and I was curious on how that was broke up, but I understand now. So thank you. All right, any other questions? All right, Secretary, thank you very appreciate you coming. I would, and I'll have Stephen get with you. I would like to, if you could break down somehow, kind of give us an idea of what your maintenance and costs and everything were before and what they're going to be going forward. Kind of give us a little bit of an idea. So before we have to work this.
Yeah, we've got that. We'll send that to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. All right, committee, we're going to go on to the dental board. And so, Nicole, if you could give us overview of the dental board, that would be great. This one is going to just take us forever.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Nicole Rincher. I'm with the Legislative Research Department, and I will be presenting the budget for the dental board. I'd also like to note that we have the Executive Director, Lane Hemsley, in the audience. He'll be available for questions afterwards. Okay, so the Kansas Dental Board licenses qualified candidates desiring to practice dentistry or dental hygiene in Kansas, administers examinations, and issues credentials to applicants according to the licensure regulations. The board also issues sedation permits to dentists and extended care permits to hygienists. If you would turn to page, let's see, sorry. 6, we can start on the fiscal year 2024 analysis. The agency requests a revised estimate of $569,000, all from the Dental Fee Fund Board, and expenditures and 3.0 FTE positions. This is the same as the amount approved by the 2023 legislature, and the governor concurs with the agency's revised estimate.
Okay. You go on 25.
Okay. Also real quick before we move on to 25, page 7 shows the change from actual expenditures. Their revised estimate is $569,000. It's an increase of $145,833 or 34.5%. This increase is mainly attributed to increased contractual services as the agency transitions to a cloud-based licensing system. Moving on to the next page, page 8, the fiscal year 2025 analysis. The agency submits a revised estimate of $574,000, all from the Dental Fee Fund, and expenditures and 3.0 FTE positions. This is an increase of $9,000 or 1.6% above the 2023 legislative approved amount. That is due to the enhancement request for the pay plan shortfall. Would you like me to explain the shortfall or yeah? The governor concurs with the agency's revised estimate.
All right. Any questions for Heather? I mean, Nicole. Sorry, Nicole. Any questions for Nicole? All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, Lane. For those of you who don't know, Lane is a former representative several years ago.
So thank you, Bishop. Long time ago now.
time does
It,
fly.
it does, indeed, it does. So thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to see you. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lane Hemsley. I'm the director of the Kansas Dental Board. I think Nicole, who I just met today, did a spectacular job summarizing the operation of the board. If you've ever been to the dentist, you know what we do and what our operations are. Our budget's pretty steady. If you have any questions, I'm happy to stand for those now.
Oh, I did on the, I'm trying to remember, are you guys the ones that kind of started the whole process of the new licensing platform? I thought you
Yes.
were. Okay.
Correct. Well, with your help, yes, we
Right.
did. Yes.
So you're one of the 7 or something?
Eight
that are-
agencies.
So how is that going?
It's actually progressing well. My discovery timeline has been identified in the next couple of weeks with OITS. So OITS, just to kind of give you a background, many agencies like ours are using antiquated licensing systems. And antiquated licensing systems in 2023 with personal identifiers are really a challenge to maintain and provide to those who grew up with iPads and cell phones in their pockets. And so it also makes it a security threat. And so in order to cure many of those deficiencies, I came to the committee over the last couple of years and asked this committee and its counterpart in the Senate to provide me funds that I had adequate resources for in our fee fund to enhance those. We've worked with the IT department, OITS, Office of Information Technology Services, and they have identified a vendor through the state bidding process. And my agency and 7 others are currently on a timeline to join a third-party vendor who's already been vetted, who's been identified and provides municipal services, governmental services across the country. And so my discovery timeline starts in a couple of weeks, and they anticipate that we'll be live within the next year or so. The spend out that will occur is for the build out. So when you see that large $135,000 expenditures, because that's to build the infrastructure to match my existing database to what would be necessarily deployed for future purposes. The same will occur next year. And after that, it will just be maintenance, as you were talking about with the Department of Labor. So I anticipate our spend to stay pretty steady after we get that up and running. Really excited about it. So.
Yeah. Do you have an idea of the maintenance? What that?
Yeah, our annual fee is actually going to drop significantly. The largest part's a build out. We've been told or advised currently based on what they believe will take somewhere in the range of $15,000 to $25,000 a year. So the largest part's just the build out up front. The upshot with all of this is it will tie very nicely into the state treasurer's office, which monitors our funds. So there won't be any third party payment provider. That payment provider is called KIC, Kansas Information Consortium. There are 6 in Kansas here. So all of that will already tie in very, very nicely together. The IT department's on the 2nd floor of Landon, about 2 doors down from the state treasurer's office and 2 floors up from me. So we're working right nicely together. So as soon as they get me up and running, it'll be mostly IT, which certainly exceeds my capabilities. But then after that, everything should fall into place, we hope.
Right. And then committee, just for your information, once these agencies plus other agencies are all kind of on this system, then it gives us the ability to implement Senate Bill 66, which will then allow for reciprocity and searching among from other states, and it hopefully will all work together but that hasn't been funded yet. So
no, it hasn't. But on that note, or on that score with Senate Bill 66, I might mention that was a spectacular piece of legislation, if I might say so, for licensing agencies and other agencies, the same or substantially similar. Because for the first time, at least in my knowledge of legislative history, it was a directive to have the IT department provide back support for licensing agencies who primarily been on your own. You come in and you say, hey, we need $500,000 to go, but there hasn't really been a cohesive project. Board of Accountancy may be on one system, I'm on another, Healing Arts is on another. Everybody's very separated. So Senate Bill 66 will, I think, bring everybody under the same umbrella, which provides an economy of scale, cost savings financially. And it also, I think, for future purposes, would allow us to trade staff. So right now, you're talking about 3 FTE. Well, if I decide to move on or other people decide to move on, well, it'd be nice to have somebody down the street at Healing Arts or somebody else that could say, oh, well, we know how to run that system too, because it's the same one we're running. So it's a nice cohesive collaborative project, and certainly something that this committee and your fellow legislators should be proud of. I think it'll be a nice project when it settles.
I think so too. Yeah. And we may actually see when OATS comes in, we may actually see a pay for, possibly for Senate Bill 66. We'll see how that goes along. So.
Great project.
So any other questions for Representative Riley? Sorry. Jeez.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So give me a little background here. Some of the different agencies that have came in, part of what they do is they do training. And I don't see that as any one of your goals or things that you have for training for people. So where do the hygienists and the dentists get their training? Do they have ongoing ethics training, ongoing stuff anything that's under your watch? Do you do any of that? Because I'm not seeing any of that here. So.
Well, it's a fantastic question. The short answer is yes. All licensees are required to be, before they become licensees, they're educated at institutions across the country. So for example, some of you may not know, Kansas does not have a dental school to produce dentists. That might be new information to many. What we would consider our dental school is at the University of Missouri in Kansas City, just right over the state line. That's where most of the dentists hail. Some come from Creighton or Nebraska, Oklahoma, Colorado. So it's really kind of a Midwestern drawdown. All of those dentists and dental hygienists go to an approved institutions, educationally approved and recognized by the Board of Regents, and also what's called the Commission on Dental Accreditation, which is governed by the American Dental Association. So they're all educated in the same manner. So somebody that's educated in California is going to have the same education that they garner here. We do have dental hygiene schools. So if any of you are from Emporia, Flint Hills is your constituency, or they used to have a school in Manhattan, don't have one anymore, but you'll find in Wichita State, they have a dental hygiene program, if any of you represents the Wichita area. And so we have dental hygiene schools across the state, Colby, for the Western Kansas residents, which really is a nice boon to that northwestern quadrant of the state there. All of those are educational institutions. So that's the front end of education. The continuing education is on the licensee. I've offered continuing education just as a courtesy to some of the dentists that I've known for many, many years. So I'll offer continuing education courses on occasion. It's usually ethics, which is required every license renewal cycle. But for example, dentists are required to have 60 hours of continuing education. That's all regulatory. It's state law. Dental hygienists are required to have 30. And there are numerous recognized commercial entities, including but not limited to the American Academy on General Dentistry and others, that most people would get the same training. So you want your surgeon from Missouri to have pretty much the same training here. So we require them to have that. They're required to attest that they have that every time they renew their license. And then we do a small sampling to make sure those folks have acquired their education.
Well, follow-up question on that then. And I appreciate that you came up with the additional measures here as far as the budgeting measures. But a lot of that, was around complaints. And when we take a look here at, I think it's on page 260, you're looking at your number of complaints, and you're projecting in 2023 actuals that you had 77 complaints, and you're projecting 100 and 100. Going back to the training and different things like that, seems like that would be interrelated as far as, we're getting complaints about this. We need to have some training about this so you don't get these complaints, or I guess, and why are you projecting more complaints?
I've been around state licensing agencies my entire legal career, and certainly around the dental board off and on for the past 20 years. We average about 100 complaints, and it ebbs and flows a little bit, give or take 10 or 15. Large part of those are factually sensitive scenarios that no amount of training or additional nudging on behalf of the board could cure, primarily because what it amounts to is not the skill set that people should have. It's the outcome of the procedure. So sometimes a procedure is inadequate or substandard in some way. So we've seen everything from a root canal gone bad to a dentist pulls the wrong tooth. Each one of your teeth, for example, each one of your teeth is numbered. Tooth number 31 looks an awful lot like 32. And if they have a bad Tuesday, they hit 31 and not 32. And so that's, we see those types of situations. And so that's a large part of what those are. But I've seen everything across the line for many, many years. But most of these are outliers. I can tell you the outcomes are pretty easily resolved. Most of the time, in my experience, your constituents, patients, your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, they don't actually know what happened. And some of it is poor bedside, chairside manner from the dentist, or the bill was wrong. We don't cure those issues. So some of those we resolve. The most egregious cases get resolved with disciplinary matters against their license, up to and including revocation of their license. And so we have, over the course of the last several years, implemented an ethics training to kind of try to resolve some of those issues. But by and large, that number is fairly steady. It'll flex 75 to 100 one way or the other. But it's a great question. I wish there was more cohesion in that answer, but it just, some of it's just patient care just gets rendered the wrong way one day.
Any other questions for Mr. Hensley? All right. Lane, thank you.
True pleasure to see all of you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Take care.
All right, committee, last for today is optometry board, and Amanda, if you could give us the.
I will keep this brief. I'm Amanda with Legislative Research. I'm going to focus really on just that first page, that table at the top. In those middle columns, you can see that the governor concurs with the agency's request for fiscal year 2024, and that is the same amount that was approved last session. And then in 2025, you can see there's an increase there. And if you want to flip to page, there we go, page 7, you'll see that the optometry board is asking for that $3,024 for the pay plan shortfall. And that brings the total to $232,620. And the change in FTE was because last session you guys did approve them to cross-train an executive director for 3 months. So that's what you're seeing in 2025. With that, I can stand for questions. Jan Murray from the agency is also here.
Okay. Yeah, I forgot about that, about the cross-training. Yeah, so. Yeah, that's right. So the, so they went from 1 to, so they have 2 now instead of just 1.
Correct.
All right. Any questions for Amanda? Representative Turk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's the month that drops back down to just 1? When does that conclude, that 6-month overlap?
So it'll just be in fiscal year 2025. They have about, I think, I don't remember. I'd have to look at the appropriations report for how much was given. It's just for 3 months in fiscal year 2025 for them to cross-train. I don't know that the agency has decided when that will be. You might be able to ask them.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you. All right. We have with us, well, no, we don't. Jan Murray's written testimony only. Oh, no, you are here. Okay. I was thinking.
Sorry. And I may see if in 2026, you may see me add a little bit more onto that, just because we're right there at the end of the year end, that I might add into the FY26 budget a little bit more for the cross training. My predecessor, I worked with her for 3 months or 6 months. I started in April and I think she left in October. So, but I'm hoping not to be around that long, to be honest. That's it. That was easy. Thank you. I'm planning to. Thank you. Yeah, but you'll still see me next year for budgets, I think. Unless I can figure out how to get out of that next year too.